Hello, today we're going to talk about relative clauses, part 2. The aims of this presentation are the following. We're going to look into the different functions that a relative pronoun can have within the relative clause. These functions are, as you can see on the screen, subject or object. And then we're going to explain those cases where omission of the relative pronoun is possible. First of all, let's have a look at the relative pronouns and their functions. A relative pronoun can be the object of a relative clause. Let's have a look at the example on the screen. Mike is a forester. I saw him at the fair. Him in this sentence is working as an object. Okay, Mike, who I saw at the fair, is a forester. If we join these two sentences into one, we have a relative clause here, who I saw at the fair. In this relative clause, we have a subject, which is I. We have a verb, which is saw, and then we have an object, which is who, the relative pronoun. So in this case, the relative pronoun is functioning as an object. Notice that the object relative pronoun comes at the beginning of the relative clause. Let's have a look at the example. Mike, who I saw at the fair, is a farmer. Also notice that relative pronouns come immediately after the noun to which they refer. In this case, who refers to Mike. Very important, do not use both an object relative pronoun and an object pronoun in the same relative clause. This is a very common mistake. Let's have a look at the example. Mike is a farmer who I saw him at the fair. This sentence is incorrect because you have an object pronoun that is not necessary, him. Okay, a relative pronoun can also be the object of a preposition. For example, Luke's the forester. I work for him. In this case, we have a verb to work with a preposition for and then an object pronoun, him. If we join these two sentences together with a relative pronoun, this is the result sentence. Luke is the forester that I work for. Remember that in informal speaking or writing, we normally put the preposition at the end of the sentence. For example, this is a field which I told you about, and the preposition about goes at the end. On the contrary, in formal English, we sometimes put the preposition at the beginning of the clause, and we always use whom and which, and not who or that. Let's have a look at some examples. Mike is a farmer for whom I work. So the preposition comes before the relative pronoun and we use whom because Mike is a person. In the second sentence, this is a field about which I told you, we have the same situation. We have first the preposition about followed by the relative pronoun which. Now we're going to have a look at other relative pronouns functions, that of subject. A relative pronoun can be the subject of a relative clause. For example, Mike does organic farming. Mike has had a great yield this year. If we join these two sentences together with a relative pronoun, this is the resulting clause. Mike, who has had a great yield this year, does organic farming. Here we have a non-defining relative clause, who has had a great yield this year. The subject of has had is the relative pronoun who. So, in this case, the relative pronoun is working as a subject of a verb. Okay, now we're going to have a look at cases where omission of the relative pronoun is possible. This means that in English, there are occasions where you can omit the relative pronoun. In those cases, you normally don't use the relative pronoun because it's more natural not to use it. Okay, you can leave out or omit the relative pronoun in the following situations. When the relative pronoun is working as an object in defining relative clauses. Let's have a look at one example. He is the farmer who I have bought the organic vegetables from. Here we have a defining relative clause. In the defining relative clause we have a subject, I, we have a verb, have bought, and then we have an object. In this case, the relative pronoun who. So, in cases like this, the relative pronoun is working as an object. and therefore we can leave it out. We can omit the relative pronoun. Therefore, it's more natural to say, he is the farmer I have bought the organic vegetables from. We can also omit the relative pronoun when. For example, I remember the day when I first planted the tiger nuts. So again, it's more natural to say, I remember the day I first planted the tiger nuts. Okay, now let's have a look at those cases where you can never leave out or omit the relative pronoun. We can never omit relative pronouns in a non-defining relative clause. Remember, non-defining relative clauses are used to provide extra information, and the noun to which they refer is normally identified. Let's have a look at the example on the screen. I have bought some organic veggies which are sold in the farm near ours. In this case, we have a non-defining relative clause which are sold in the farm near ours. So we never omit the relative pronoun. We can also, we never omit the relative pronoun whose or the relative pronoun where. Now, remember that you need to consider the following when deciding which relative pronoun to use and when it can be omitted. First of all, you have to ask yourselves, is the pronoun working as the subject or object or possessive of a relative clause? Then you have to ask yourself, does it refer to a person or an object? And finally, is the relative clause a defining or a non-defining relative clause? Okay, in the two following slides, you have some tables which summarize the use of relative pronouns in both defining and non-defining relative clauses, and also specifying if the relative pronoun functions as a subject, as an object, or a possessive. Let's have a look at the first table. Pronouns in defining clauses. When the pronoun is working as a subject, remember that you normally use who or that if you want to refer to a person, and you use which or that if you want to refer to an object. When the relative pronoun is working as an object, you normally omit the relative pronoun or use that, who, or whom. And if the relative pronoun refers to an object, you can omit it or use which or that. And then, to finish, if the relative pronoun is a possessive, you never omit the relative pronoun and you always use whose if you refer to a person and whose of which if you refer to an object. Now let's have a look at what happens in non-defining relative clauses. In non-defining relative clauses, if the relative pronoun is working as a subject, remember you always use who and you never use that if you refer to a person, and you use which if you refer to an object. If the relative pronoun is working as an object, we normally use who or whom to refer to a person and which to refer to an object. And to finish, if the relative pronoun is a possessive, we normally use whose to refer to people and whose of which to refer to objects. Okay, now let's have a look at some practice. Exercise 1. Exercise 1. Complete the following sentences with a relative pronoun. In which sentences can you leave it out? Sentence number 1. A pigsty is an enclosed place, blank, pigs are kept and raised. The next sentence. B. A stud is a male animal, blank, is especially kept for breeding purposes. C. Pork is the flesh of a pig, blank, we normally eat. D. A pet is an animal kept in close contact with humans, blank, feel affection for it. E. Horticulture is the science, blank, main objective is to study the cultivation of gardens. And now let's have a look at the solutions. Okay, A. A pigsty is an enclosed place where pigs are kept and raised. Remember that where refers to a place, so we use this adverb relative pronoun. Next sentence. A stud is a male animal which or that is specially kept for breeding purposes. In this case, which or that is a relative pronoun who is working as the subject of the verb is especially kept. So in this case, you cannot omit the relative pronoun. Let's have a look at the next sentence. Pork is the flesh of a pig, that of which we normally eat. In this case, that of which is part of a clause which has a subject. The subject of this verb, eat, is we. So the relative pronoun is working as an object. In this case, we can omit the relative pronoun. That is why it appears in brackets. So it's more natural to say, pork is the flesh of a pig we normally eat. Let's have a look at the next one. D. A pet is an animal kept in close contact for humans who or that feel affection for it. In this case, the relative who or that is the subject of the verb, feel affection for it. So, when relative pronouns work as a subject, they can never be omitted. And let's have a look at the last one. Horticulture is a science whose main objective is to study the cultivation of gardens. In this case, we have the pronoun, the possessive who, whose, and whose can never be omitted from a relative clause. And that is all for today. Thank you very much.